So, hello, and welcome to our next webinar in our series. And it's going to be a real challenge getting this much information into a coherent package, but we're going to try. So, as I said, thank you for attending. One of the things that I want to say that I generally don't say is that all of the work that we're doing tonight and all of my work is the foundation for that work is my book, Creating a World That Works for All. And if you've got that book, you are grounded in what's going to happen next. If you don't have that book, you could be asking yourself a lot of questions that are answered in the book. So I would suggest that you get the book. There's also another foundation for this work, and that is 3 videos that we've been calling the 3 critical context videos. And those videos are the 12 global challenges video, the envisioning the solution video, and the 5 foundational values video. And you should be seeing those popping up in your chat box right now, the links for those. Now, if you've been on the prior videos of those 3, you don't have to do those again. You were there. If you don't have if you've missed 1 or 2 or all 3 of them, you now have the links where you can go back and check this out. Your life and my life will be a lot more coherent once we when we have the same foundation, so that we don't get an hour down the road and you say, well, what's inclusivity mean? And I'm going to then start pulling out what little tiny hair I've got and refer you to my book, refer you to the other videos, and we'll keep going. Tonight we're going to go through 2 hours, and then next Tuesday we'll go through 2 more hours, and that's going to wrap up our the 5 steps of revolution. We're going to do steps 1 and 2 tonight. Step 3 we've already done, and that's the dream of the butterfly. There's a webinar for that, and we're going to put the link up for that webinar. So between tonight and next Tuesday, you're going to have an opportunity to go and look at the dream of the butterfly, because that will fill in step 3. Then step 4 and 5 we'll be doing next Tuesday. So this is going to be a very tight schedule, but we really do want to leave time for dialogue. We really want to leave time for you asking questions if you have any. And I'm going to try to have some time for some small group work, depending on the number of participants we have and depending on how much time we've got. One more piece of background, and then we'll get going. If you want to get my attention, there are a couple of different ways of doing that. One of them is to raise your digital hand somewhere down here on your screen. You're going to see a whole bunch of buttons, and one of the buttons says participants, and when you click on that, you can get a dialogue that says raise hand. And if you raise your hand when you click that dialogue, I'll see it, and then I'll call on you. If you don't have that, and one of the reasons that you wouldn't have that is if you're calling in on a telephone, then turn your screen on, and when I see you, you wave your real meat hand, and I'll get you'll get my attention that way. If you're calling on the telephone and you don't even have a screen, start talking, and I'll ask you to wait until I finish my sentence, and then we'll get to you. So one way or another, though, I am hoping that we're all going to be able to participate in this what I think is really important work. So without further housekeeping stuff, I want to get us started. And one of the things I want to start us with is something that's been very foundational for me. Now, this is something that I would ask you to ask those that you think of as the people you think of as people in leadership. What are their foundational values? We make assumptions that people have them, and guess what? A lot of people don't. Or their foundational values may be in conflict with yours. They may be the exact opposite of yours. So we're going to be spending a little bit of time looking at that foundation. And what I'd like to do to get us started is to read a quote by a woman who has been probably one of the most articulate spokespersons for the notion of an inclusive, nonviolent revolution. And I think it's absolutely, very, very interesting that almost nobody in the West, nobody in America knows who she is, okay? And so her name is Vamala Thakar, and I'm probably murdering her name. She passed away, I think, 10, 15 years or so ago. And she wrote an article called Awakening to Total Revolution, Enlightenment and the World Crisis. And we're going to put up a link to that entire article. Every word of that should be read by everybody that's beyond junior high school. And again, as I said, nobody in this country even knows who she is. These are just a couple of quotes from her. She says, in a time when the survival of the human race is in question, to continue with the status quo is to cooperate with insanity, to contribute to chaos. And I don't have the right quote in front of me. There she goes. I'm going to read that again. In a time when the survival of the human race is in question, to continue with the status quo is to cooperate with insanity, to contribute to chaos. The call is not to one of the revolutionary formulas of the past. That's the violent revolution type. They have failed. Why drag them out again, even in new regalia? The challenge now is to create an entirely new, vital revolution that takes the whole of life into its sphere. Now, that's really, I think, powerful stuff. And when we look at the notion of revolution, we look at the notion of what even our problems are. What we're seeing is people talking about one problem. It's either climate change. Oh my God, climate change, climate change. Or Trump. Oh my God, Trump, Trump. And that's simply not the case. The case is that everything is the problem. All of our issues are the problem. And they all fit together. They create a near seamless web. But we're the ones that have to find the seams to unravel it and knit together out of that a whole new society. That's the challenge that we're facing. So our first step in this process is to stand in truth. Now, what do I mean by that? one of my um, uh, teachers, one of the people that I consider to be part of the lineage of inclusive revolution, is Václav Havel. And he wrote a book called Living in Truth. And uh, I want to, I don't know if this is going to show up on the camera or not, but, and it's not. The papers on the edge of my book, this book is so old and so well read that the tabs I put on there are falling apart. When I met Havel for the first time, and this was, back in the 90s, I had brought my book with me, and I wanted him to give me his autograph. And I had it open to the page where you're supposed to sign, and he took the book from me, and he said, "I want to see if you've actually read this book. Yeah, did you go over in the corner and just buy it, and I'm going to sign it?" So he opened the book up, and every single page in this book is marked up. And he laughed, and he says, "You really read the book." I mean, the spine was about to crack on it. So he gave me his signature, and he writes his signature sideways to make sure that people know it's his signature. But the title to this book is Living in Truth, because in the book what he says is that we're living a lie, that the society that we've created is a lie. It's a falsehood, and we're all participating in the falsehood. We lie to ourselves, we lie to each other, and we lie to support the entire society. So the lies we tell to ourselves are things like, "Oh, I'm powerless, there's nothing I can do about it. Those people over there, the leaders, they're the ones that have to do something about it because they have power. I don't have any power." And that's not the truth. Well, it is the truth once you've given all your power away. But until that happens, you've got amazing power to do almost anything. And another lie is, "Oh, this isn't my fault. I didn't do anything wrong here." Well, number one, yes, you did. Number two, we are all the beneficiaries of other people doing wrong things in our name. What we have to do is take back our power and say to those who are doing those things, "No, I don't want you doing this for me. And you definitely don't have my permission to do this in my name." And one of the consensual lies that we tell is, "Oh, well, I'm just too old. I can't be involved in this kind of stuff. This is for the younger people." I was sitting outside at the coffee house, reading a book, minding my own business, and someone came and said, "Can I sit at your table?" And I said, "Of course." And we wound up talking, and within 10 minutes, we got around to Common Way, and she almost immediately says, "Oh, yeah, that's really interesting work that you are doing, but I'm too old for this." And I told her a story, which is a very true story. I was doing this work 15, 20 years or so ago, and I'd made a presentation on Common Way, and a woman in the audience said, "I'm going to join your effort." And she said, "I'm 95 years old. I won't see the culmination of this. I won't see a world that works for all. But it's important," she said, "it's important for me to let my grandchildren know that their grandmother helped to start this movement." Okay. Now, so I said this to the woman sitting at my table, and I said, "Now, what are you going to say to your grandchildren?" And she looked at me. She had the jaw dropped look, and She said, I'm going to think about it. And that's about all I can ask for over 20 minutes sitting at a table. But I think that we all buy into those lies. We buy into the lie that everything's okay. Maybe we need to tweak this over here a little bit, maybe tweak that over there a little bit. But the bottom line is, for any of those reasons, I'm not going to take powerful, effective action to change. So let me give you an example of what Havel called the consensual lie. In his book, Living in Truth, he talks about a greengrocer, somebody who has a grocery store. The party boss comes by and he's got this sign, and the sign says, "Workers of the world unite." And the party boss says, "Can you put this in your window?" And the greengrocer says, "Of course." And he puts it in his window, "Workers of the world unite." Now, he doesn't give a crap about the workers of the world. He doesn't care whether they unite. He doesn't identify with any of them. But if he goes along with what the party boss said, maybe he'll get some better vegetables in. Maybe he'll get lower taxes or things like that. Plus, everybody else is doing this. Everybody else is putting this sign up. He knows this because he had to go downtown to do some work, and he walked into an office and he saw the secretary on her desk had a sign that said, "Workers of the world unite." And so he said, "Yeah, same sign I've got." Now, the secretary doesn't give a crap about the workers of the world and whether or not they unite. What she cares about is, am I going to get a promotion next year? Am I going to get a raise? Will I get a chance to head up my own department? So she put the sign on her desk because her boss told her to put the sign on her desk. And everybody else is doing it. She passed the greengrocer. She saw his sign. So everybody is participating in a lie that no one believes for their own benefit. So Havel's greengrocer, Havel's example of how all of us participate in this consensual lie, including the party boss. He's passing out these signs like candy, not because he gives a crap about the workers of the world. He doesn't. What he cares about is, there's a seat opening up on the Politburo, and I want to show that I'm being a loyal party guy. So I'm gonna have the most signs that put up in my area, and that's going to get me something. So the bottom line is, all of our consensual lies, the American dream, making money is good for us, corporations are good for us, our entire way of life is good for us and good for the world. We use our military for peaceful purposes. All of these combine to create the bind that we're in right now. And all of these things are the things that we need to shift to get out of that mode. Now, in order to do that, in order to do the shift, we need to learn some things about ourselves. We need to learn what truth is. And in an age where anytime you disagree with something, you label it fake news and then completely forget about it. You don't have to worry about it anymore because you've now dismissed it as fake news. We've got to find a way to get to the truth of a matter. We can learn a lot about truth by looking at nature. We can look at the quality of our own hearts. What is your heart telling you? Not what did you just hear last week or what did the news just say to you? We can learn a lot from each other. And by that, I mean, when we start working together, when we start doing a practice together, when we do something as simple as cook food, or I don't know if you've seen a car on the road that's had trouble, and you get out and you help 3 or 4 people push the car off the road, and the people who help to push the car off the road, whenever this happens, we all look at each other and kind of smile and maybe give a thumbs up. It's like, yeah, we did something together. This is very, very important to our own spirit, but it's very important to how we create a society. In our world, we have very little opportunity to actually do things together, to do something physical in 3D. I'm not talking about virtual anything. And we have to create more opportunities for that. And that's why we're encouraging the Imaginal Cafe as a way of talking together, of doing things together, of doing things with our other. And another thing is learning from our wisdom teachers, those who came way before us, the Buddhas, the Jesuses, the Muhammads, the Rumis, the Lao Tzus, etc. And all of them and more inform my thinking and being. We also need to learn from the wisdom teachers we've got right now. And not everybody who's moving their mouth is a wisdom teacher. And you need to be able to tell the difference by listening, not just with your ear for, pleasant words, etc., but listening with your heart to see what your heart is saying is true. Okay, you have no idea how far out of time I am. I'm going to try to speed up a little bit. The second part of this first step of looking at how do we stand in truth is awakening our consciousness. And consciousness is something that is a very big topic, and we're not going to cover it today because we don't have to cover it today, because I already covered it in a prior video that's called The Next Steps for Human Consciousness. We're going to put up a link for that, and you will then have the opportunity to take a look at the realm of human consciousness. So I'm not going to talk about how to awaken your consciousness. I'm going to talk about right now in terms of how to stop putting it to sleep. Stop drugging your consciousness. There are some very powerful drugs out there that rob you of the opportunity to fully become conscious. One of them is television. Purpose of television is to stop you from thinking about your present circumstances and put yourself in a completely different and most of the time fantastical situation. So, for example, when I was down in Brazil, when I was in Rio, and Catherine, I'm going to stop your video there. So when I was down in Rio, in the favelas, these are the poorest slums in the world, and almost everybody had a satellite dish. Some of those satellite dishes were homemade. They made their own satellite dish so they could pick up television so that they could take their consciousness out of the favela. Well, when you're in pain, television is actually not a bad idea. And the only time the main time I actually watch television is when I'm in some painful situation. I was, this is back in the years when I was practicing law. I had a client who was actually in the hospital, and I had to see them in the hospital. So, and I didn't know what room they were in. So as I was walking down the corridor, I would see hospital bed, patient, television, hospital bed, patient, television. I mean, after going through 30 or 40 rooms, I realized that the television was an integral part of their getting over whatever their malady was. It was to take their consciousness away from being in pain. And I would say that that's what most of us are doing. We try to avoid the pain of the society that we live in by turning on the bright, pretty lights of television shows. So television is a form of drugging our consciousness. News is a form, I'm making quote marks, news is a form of drugging our consciousness. Most news, the popular mainstream news services involve somebody telling you what to think about, telling you how to think, creating false controversies and issues, and blinding you to the real news that's going on out there, unless they can't blind you anymore. And then they're going to try to tell you how to think about that news. So as many of you know, I have strongly urged people to go on a news diet. Okay, not if you can't go cold turkey, cut your news down to 5, 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes a day. Okay, and look at just the headlines and ask yourself the question: is this something I really need to know? Is this something that I didn't already hear? Okay, I mean, like a lot of news is just repeating the same thing over and over again. Is this something that I can do something about? I'm trying to remember who said this to me. The name will come shortly. This is a guy who was raised on an Indian reservation, and there was a story that came out of the reservation back in the days when radio was a new thing. So this is like the 20s or 30s. And the only person who had a radio was the Jesuit priest that was in their Native American village. And so on the radio, there was a story about a ferry that had overturned in India, and it killed 1,000 people, and other people were hurting, etc. And the people who were around listening to the radio got up and they started collecting blankets and dried food and some excess clothing, and they put it in the back of this one truck. And they went to the Jesuit priest and they said, you know, where's India? Because we want to take these blankets and we take this food to the people there who are hurting. And the Jesuit said, you can't drive a truck to India. It's too far away. It's too many oceans away. And then the people said, well, why did the radio tell us about this? If the purpose of your work is not, if the purpose of the information is not to awaken your compassion, why are they telling you this? Well, nowadays, the purpose of mainstream media is to awaken your fear and to awaken your powerlessness. So at the end of the news broadcast, you should feel less power than you did before. That's why you should limit your exposure to that and to anything that's going to rob you of your power, anything or anyone. Another aspect of all of this, and this is the not dulling or not damaging your consciousness, is to play games as games. And what I mean by that, lots and lots of people play lots and lots of video games, and I don't anymore, but I used to. I used to enjoy it. It was fun. And I'm talking about back in the days when, for those of you who can remember Pong, that was the height of my video games. But nowadays, people play the game as though it's reality, and therefore, instead of it becoming a harmless entertainment, it becomes something that's very harmful to your consciousness. If you are in that position, I would strongly urge you to go on a games diet, to go on a diet that says, I'm only going to expose myself to this kind of thing for X number of minutes, not hours, but minutes per day. I believe that if you're going to awaken your consciousness, you have to have a consciousness management system. And by a consciousness management system, I'm talking about meditation, a place where you shut off all of the other external stimuli around you and you focus solely on your consciousness, not your thinking, not the grocery list of stuff running around in your head, not your monkey mind, okay, but to really start focusing in on the nature of who you are. The nature of who you are before you got a body, the nature of who you are now that you've been having this body for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. Let me look at the list here. I think that's about the list as far as we go on the list right now, plus years. The nature of your consciousness after your meat body decides to stop. Someone said that your body is like the radio receiver, while your consciousness is the radio signal that goes into that receiver. If you smash the radio, the signal keeps going. And the quality of that signal is going to have a lot to do with how much you have paid attention to it over the past 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years. As you know, I do not advocate any particular consciousness management system. I'm not here to sell you on a particular meditation technique. For $29.95, you can buy my guaranteed meditation practice that'll do all the other stuff that it's supposed to do. I'm saying regardless of the process that you've got, use the process and use it on a regular basis. Use it on a basis as regular as you consult the news. In the average day, you should be consulting your inner being more than you're consulting the news. You should be consulting your inner being more than you're playing a video game. You should be consulting your inner being more than you are spending the time you're spending on Facebook. That gets to my next point, which is the development of a group consciousness. And by group consciousness, I mean working with people, and working with people who to do a particular task together. Together means 3D, face-to-face, heart-to-heart, feeling all of the elements of their energy that cannot come through a Facebook post. For those of you who are familiar with heart math is two words that they've slammed together as one word, Heart Math Institute. They talk about the mechanics of the heart, and not just as a meat pump, but as a way of creating energy fields that we interact with. They measure that the energy field of the heart extends out 50 feet. They can detect your heart your heart's wavelength 50 feet away from your body. So most of the time when you're sitting in a coffee house or you're sitting on a bus, etc., all these people are in your heart field. And the really scary thing is they're all in your heart field. your heart is trying to attune to them constantly. Most of the time it doesn't work, and your heart gets frustrated around that. So what we have to do is, when we start doing common work together, push the car off the road. Decide that we're going to write something together. Decide that we're just going to sit down and talk together. All of these things brings our hearts into coherence. It strengthens my heart, and it strengthens your heart in ways that how we're talking right now don't. We can't pretend that the time that we're spending right now is time in each other's heart fields. My heart field doesn't go out to New York or to Washington State or wherever. It's 50 feet. Maybe mine might go 60. I don't know. But the bottom line is that we need to be working with others. And most particularly working with others who don't share our culture, don't share our past experiences, don't share our perspectives. Give you a quick example of that. There's somebody I've been working with for the past, maybe 20 years or more. We've done a lot of work in dialogue processes, generally online. We had the opportunity to talk about something recently, and we realized that he and I are doing the same work, but from his perspective, he has never been poor in his life. He understands the concept that a person could not have any money. But for him, it's just a concept. It has been something that I think we measured back 3 or 4 generations, has just never been a reality. Now, so he and I are doing the same work. From my perspective, I have had that experience of being poor, not only from the time that I was born and brought home and put into a dresser drawer with a blanket in it because my mother couldn't afford a crib, until the time we went to college, and then episodically after that, I've had a continual experience of being poor. So he and I come together to try to do the same work, but without the recognition that we have this very, very different background. How much work can we get done? How difficult is it for us to recognize each other's point of view? So that's something that is that I think about a lot. That our diversity, and I don't mean that in terms of the pop fad concepts of let's get these kind of people in here and let's have a potluck so we can have eat each other's food. Isn't that so much fun? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about having everyone who is affected by the challenges that we're looking at in the room talking about it. That's a big order, and it makes us think about how we interact with the other in a very different way. The next part of the looking at standing in truth is learning how to see reality. And learning how to see reality means learning how to see the 12 global challenges and the 12 global visions. So with regard to the 12 global challenges, I think you've already got the link in your chat box. If you weren't on that call, I would suggest you look at that. You look for the 12 global challenges. That way you can see more of the picture. Not even all of it yet, but you can see more of it. If we're going to stand in our truth, we have to recognize that reform is not enough. Voting for somebody to be president is not enough. Even if we could add the power to wave the magic wand, I'm sorry, I have to get the proper magic wand, magic pen here. Wave the magic wand, okay? And all the carbon in the atmosphere disappears overnight and the Earth goes back to being happy. That means that we fixed one of 12 problems. Now, when are we actually even going to acknowledge the other 11 problems and start dealing with them? And when are we going to acknowledge that those 12 problems, the 12 challenges, have one root, and that root is in our consciousness? Someone, and I'm really tempted to call their names because they are an author that is known to a lot of people, was looking at my book, looking at Creating a World That Works for All, and handed it back to me and said, I don't believe that. I don't believe that the world can work for all. I don't believe that the world should work for all. As long as the world works for me, that's all the problem that we got. And this was kind of like throwing a fairly cold bucket of water in my face. But I was able to say to him, thank you, because I know where you're not trying to lie to me, you're not trying to pretend with me. I know where you stand. I'm going to keep working to create a world that works for all beings. And you keep doing whatever the hell it is that you do. And we'll see how it all turns out. So he did not believe that a world for all was necessary or possible. And because of that belief, he's holding it back. When more people, it doesn't have to be everybody, it has to be a significant minority of people, when they believe that a world for all is possible and a world for all is necessary, it will come into being, and it will come into being, it will feel like magic. But it's magic that some of us have been working for 30 or 40 or 50 years. It's amazing how magical it can be, and you don't look at all the stuff that came before. The last part of this section, step one, is not only do you believe that a new world is necessary and possible, you also accept that you have a responsibility to bring that world into place. When people come to my talks and they come up to me at the end and they shake my hand or they give me a hug and they say, thank you so much for your work, I'm saying to them nowadays, why do you think that's my work? Okay, I'm getting old enough. I've got enough gray in my beard now to recognize I'm not going to be around here for another 100 years. Okay, maybe another 90, but not another 100. And that being the case, who's going to do that work then? Why isn't this your work? Remember what I said in the beginning about the 95-year-old woman who said, I'm joining this so that my grandkids will know that I was part of the movement to create a world that works for all beings. Once we accept the responsibility to act, this gives us the power to act. And this is a very, very important point. I take responsibility so that I can take power. I have responsibility and I therefore have power. When I hold up my protest sign and say, you people have to change, I take all of my power and I give it to them, and then I'm angry that they've got it. Well, don't be angry, just don't give them your power. Make a decision on your own of how you can act. And I'll tell you this story really quickly, then we're going to take a very short break, and then I'm going to come back and ask for questions, comments, opinions, etc. And then we get to the second step. So the story. This happened some years ago, a decade or so ago. And I was doing some work with a community organization. Some of you have heard this story before. I was doing work with a community organization, and they had a problem. The city of Portland was doing enforcement for prostitution on a main street. And all they did was drive the prostitution over into a side street that was a residential community. So the neighborhood wanted the police to block the side street also for non-residential traffic. And they had had several meetings with the various officials, kind of getting shoved from one office to another office to another office. And they brought me in to help them in this shuffling process so they could get their street blocked. And this is one of the days when I actually came in. It was a night meeting, and I was tired that I had worked a full day that day, and was walked in tired, so I was less than fully diplomatic. And when they explained the problem, I said, why don't you just go out and block the street? And they all looked at each other and then looked at me, and it's like, well, they won't let us. The ubiquitous they, somebody downtown in City Hall, etc. And then I said, just get some sticks, some peach baskets, just block the street. And again, there was this stunned silence, and they said, well, they will move the block. I said, put it back. And if they move it again, go out there with pickaxes and dig up the street. Who does that street belong to? And until I asked that question, nobody had thought about that. The street belonged to them, whoever them was, a city hall or people with guns or the guys with asphalt that spread. It's like it belonged to everybody but themselves. I said, that street belongs to you. And you're all in agreement on what needs to happen in that street. So I said, the next time you meet with the city, I don't have to go with you. I said, you look them in the eye and you say, this street will be blocked in 30 days. The only question for this meeting is whether we do it or you do it. And if you sit there with that resolve in your heart, that street is going to get blocked in no time flat. They went to the meeting, they said that. The street got blocked by the city in 2 weeks. Now, that's the power of that kind of, once you accept your responsibility to act, that's the power that it unleashes. So when Havel wrote Living in Truth, he was a prisoner in a Soviet prison. And he said, when we take that kind of power, we don't really know what's going to happen next. Well, guess what? We know what's going to happen next. You take over the entire country. So they took Havel out of prison. dusted him off, put a tie on him, and made him the president. Same thing happened to Nelson Mandela. They took him out of prison, dusted him off, put a tie on him, and made him the president. So the people who could be the president of, and I won't say the United States because we may break up as a society. We may wind up joining Canada, which I think is not a half bad idea. We may have a continental government that includes Canada and everything else. But the president of that could be someone that's on this call right now. The president of that could be someone that somebody on this call knows and you're going to go talk to, and all of a sudden things are going to click and wheels are going to turn, etc. I happened to be in Prague 3 weeks after the Velvet Revolution, after they defeated the second largest superpower in the world without firing one shot. And in the castle, all the people who were now the government were people who started out just as dissidents, just as, you know, moms and pops who were saying, I'm sick and tired of the deal that we've got. At that time in the castle, they would have hourly laugh breaks. They would just stop and start laughing. And the thing they were laughing about was, we're the government right now. So I'm hopeful that in our 20 years, in our 30 years, in our 40 years, we will be able to stop addressing power to someone else and start accepting our responsibility and also start accepting our empowerment to act. Okay, we are right at our break time. We're going to have to make this a 5-minute break. And so I am going to reconvene us at the top of the hour, and we will go from there. Please be thinking about your questions and be thinking about your comments that you'd like to make, because we're going to start off about 5 or 10 minutes of that, and then I'm going to get into step 2. Okay, so thank you, and I'm going to stop the recording right now. Pause the recording. Okay. So we're rolling again. I have this is show and tell, and this is going to give us an opportunity to get our hands up. So if you want to digitally raise your hand now, that would be good. And while you're doing that, I just want to show you another of Havel's books that I have. I've got, I think, all of his political writings. But he wrote this very important book called The Art of the Possible. And his subtitle here is really important. Politics as morality in practice. I mean, so how you actually practice your morality is what politics ought to be. And we know that it's not. Okay, so I thought I saw a hand go up, but I don't see it now. And so I'm looking to see if there are any hands up to someone who wants to ask a question, make a statement. Are you're completely overwhelmed by everything I just said, or you're doing something else? I'm going to so I'm going to give you 30 more seconds to put your hand up. I'm going to read you 2 quotes from the Art of the Impossible. Oh, I guess I should ask. I'm assuming that everyone saw that little 3-minute doodly video that I did that had the Nelson Mandela quote in it. which is why I grabbed this book off the shelf. Um, that things seem impossible until they're done. So the art of the impossible, the art of doing the impossible, is what those of us who are looking for an inclusive, nonviolent, positive revolution are all about. But here's one of the things that Havel said when he was speaking at UCLA. He said the word environment tacitly implies that whatever is not human merely envelops us and is therefore inferior to us, something we need care for only if it is in our interest to do so. Being, nature, the universe, they are all one infinitely complex and mysterious meta-organism of which we are but a part, though a unique one. Now, look at how we're trying to get people interested in dealing with global climate change. We're only doing it because it's in our interest that the climate not change. We're not doing this for the climate's sake. We're not doing this for the Earth's sake. We're doing it for our own sake. And that's the consciousness. Even the people who are saying, I'm trying to fight climate change, we still have to work on the consciousness that says, I'm trying to do this so that I will get the same benefits my parents got, okay? As opposed to saying it was wrong to put the carbon in the atmosphere in the first place. It's wrong to continue doing that. And even if it costs us money, even if it costs us time, even if I have to devote my entire life to this, this is still something that needs to happen. A second, since I still don't see any hands, a second quote. And here he's talking about the nature of politics itself and explaining a little bit about what he means as politics as morality in practice. Where Havel says, politics should be primarily the domain of people with a heightened sense of responsibility. We just finished talking about responsibility 10 minutes ago. With a heightened sense of responsibility and a heightened understanding of the mysterious complexity of being. Now, when Havel talks about the nature of being, he's talking about the nature of all reality, including a transcendent reality. He almost never uses the term God because, and he says he does that as a courtesy to God because all politicians talk about God and they do something different. But whether you believe in a God or not, this nature of being exists. I'm here, you're there, everything is there. So he then goes on to say, those who say that politics is disreputable, in fact, help make it so. What we have to say is that politics should be the domain of those of us who see have a larger sense of reality. And we need to make it so. Okay, that was a great question and answer period since I talked through the whole thing. Last call for questions. Okay, so the next step is what I call crossing the dragon's gate. And in order to tell you that, I have to tell you a story that was told to me many, many years ago. And this story stuck with me for the longest time, and I'm about to stick it with you. And I'll tell you that when I first heard this story, I got really, really mad. So maybe you might too. And the story is about, it's a fable, and it's about a girl who lived in a village, and she started having dreams. And the dream that this little girl had was of a golden city that was set on a hill. This is beautiful, beautiful dream. So night after night, she's dreaming the same dream. And she goes to her mother and father, and they don't know what the dream means. And they go to the wise man and the wise woman in the village, and they don't know what the dream means. So finally, she says, I have to go out and I have to find this golden city on the hill. Well, the parents were not crazy about the idea, but they could tell that she was obsessed with this. So as a young girl, she strikes out on her own and she starts wandering, trying to find the golden city. So as she's wandering around and she's running into people and she's asking them, and some say, yeah, it's over there. And somebody says, no, it's over there. And she wanders for years and years and becomes quite an accomplished young woman, has had many adventures in the forest, etc., looking for this golden city. And so finally, one day she comes to a clearing, and across the clearing, up on a hill, there is the golden city, the one of her dreams. In fact, the real city was even more beautiful than the city that was in her dreams. So with a very thankful heart, she starts approaching. She walks toward the golden city. And as she's walking to it, she sees that the city is surrounded by a wall. And there's a gate in the wall. And as she gets up closer, she sees that there's a fire-breathing dragon sitting right in the middle of the gate. As she walks up to the dragon rears itself up to its full height and starts breathing fire and says, "You cannot enter." Well, she runs in the other direction and is kind of confused. It's like, this is my city. How can this not be the city of my dreams? So she goes back, and every time she goes in, the dragon rears up and says, "You cannot enter." She tries sneaking around the corner. The dragon catches her. She tries tiptoeing. The dragon always hears her. And so she finally sets up a tent for herself, etc., at the gate of her golden city. And every few years or so, she'll try to get past the dragon, and dragon, as young as ever, rears up and says, "You cannot enter." So she lives out her life outside the gate of her golden city on the hill. And as she has gotten older and she is about to die with her last energy, she's thought of something. And with her last energy, she pulls herself to the gate. And the dragon, as young and fresh as ever, she asked the dragon a question. She said, "In all of these years, how come I've never seen another person try to get through this gate?" And the dragon said, "Of course not. This was your gate." And with that, she dies. Well, when I first heard this, I wanted her to come back to life, to figure out how to get past the dragon, become a young woman again. The idea that this story ended on her failure was not appealing to me. But the next question was, how many of us accommodate our dragons? How many of us, in the face of complete terror and fear, turn the other way? How many of us, I mean, and actually she didn't turn the other. She set up shop right outside of her fears. She could look into her golden city anytime she wanted to, but she couldn't go. She could not walk in without acknowledging, confronting, and walking past her fears. She could have said at any time to the dragon, I'm coming in right now. You can do anything you want to do. You can burn all my skin off. You can kill me right here, but you'll have to kill me in order to get me from getting into my golden city. How many of us say that? How many of us have confronted the dragon within? That dragon knew what its job was. The dragon's job was to find out exactly how serious she was to get into her city. The dragon had a job to do, and so did she. And unfortunately, she didn't recognize her job while she was still alive. So we live in a society that teaches us multiple levels of denial around our fears. We're taught first to ignore the fear. Oh, don't worry about that. Okay. In fact, you can ignore the fear, and we've got some pills for that. You know, whatever you're afraid of, we got a pill for it. We are told to blame blame my fear on somebody else. That person made me afraid. That person kept me out of the city. That person kept me from my role, etc. We are actually encouraged to succumb to our fears, to get to a point where we are drugged enough or entertained enough that we don't feel our fears. Now, all of those things are things that exist inside of you, inside of your orbit. I don't know what your dragon looks like. I got a pretty good idea what mine looks like. The first time you face that dragon, it really is 30 feet tall and breathing fire. If she had walked past that, she would have seen it was an illusion. Dragon didn't even exist. She'd have seen another wall and another gate and a smaller dragon. He wouldn't have been breathing fire and breathing smoke. And she would have walked past that one because she had the courage to walk past the bigger one. And she'd have seen another wall, another gate, this time with a 4-foot tall dragon that's breathing warm air. And finally, her final wall would have been 6 inches high, and her final dragon would have been a mouse. We can tell, I can tell you what you are willing to spend your life on by how willing you are to take the road less traveled, how willing you are to take the path that does not lead to safety and security in the context of society, but leads to the satisfaction of your heart being responded to, your heart being answered. I'm this is the sound of me biting my tongue because I've got like 4 or 5 different situations where I've had to face that dragon. But a number of you on the call already know some of those, and some of those I've written about. So I'm going to pass that right now, and I'm going to talk about another level of fear, another level of the shadow. And this is, I think 2 or 3 of you have participated in a process from several years ago called Releasing the Shadow, Embracing the Light. This is where we start looking at the societal shadows that keep us from taking effective action in our lives. I'm not talking about Carl Jung's shadows. Okay, I'm not talking about the psychological shadows. What I'm talking about are the things that exist in this society, mainly in American society, that hold us back from our excellence. In the Shadow to Light program, we talk about 4 shadows. The shadow of violence and how violence is perpetrated throughout our society. The shadow of the other, how all of us have the person or the group that we separate ourselves from. The third shadow is the shadow of greed and poverty, that poverty and greed are 2 sides of the same coin, and that coin keeps us locked in unhealthy, toxic relationships. It's unhealthy and toxic for people who are poor. It's unhealthy and toxic for people who have more resources they could ever spend in 100 lifetimes. And then the last shadow is the shadow of despair, that looks like depression, that looks like suicide, that looks like risk-taking behavior, because we are not reconciled to who and what we are. Now, the opposite of those 4 shadows are 4 lights. The light of peace and security. I will go out on a bit of a limb here. Most of us who have talked about peace haven't experienced it. We don't know what peace looks like because we're in an environment where I myself am not secure and the people all around me are not secure. How can I be peaceful in a situation where others are not peaceful and are not secure? So creating a society that is inclusive of peace and security should be a goal for all of us. The second, the opposite of a society where we have self and other, is a society where we're experiencing inclusive community. We're including people in our community regardless of their cultural, social, religious, and even ideological differences. The third light, and this is the opposite of poverty and greed, is abundant enoughness, that all of us have enough. Now, my enoughness, my enoughness you can see behind me right now. This is enough for me. I have enough food. Actually, if you look at my waistline, maybe a little bit too much. Where I have enough living, I have enough car, I have enough clothes, I have enough. And because I have enough, I don't have to be in the rat race of acquiring more and more and more and more. So this is what I call abundant enoughness. And the last light, the last opposite of the shadow of despair, depression, and suicide is the light of deep fulfillment, that I'm living a fulfilled life. If you live a fulfilled life, you don't need a whole bunch of stuff. If you're not living a fulfilled life, you fill it up with activities, and you don't. Your television set can't get too big. Your bank account can't have too many zeros in it, and it's not. None of it satisfies who and what you are. So, we were doing the Shadow to Light program for about 4 or 5 years here locally. We tried to do it nationally. With varying success. And I'm putting that back in gear, and I'm looking at doing that coming out of here, out of Commonway. And it'll be a combination of live and recorded sessions. We may start this in November. It would be, I'm going to try to do this in 4 or 5 sessions. We had it in 8 sessions before, but we've got a lot of it that's already pre-recorded that you can do in your own time. So we're going to try to do this in like 5 sessions in November. I want to do a quick poll. If any of that sounds interesting to you, if you can raise your hand, if you can hit your participant button and then look at raising your hand. So I see 1 hand up. I see 2 hands up. Okay. I'm seeing a couple of people who are actually who have done Shadow to Light before. Okay, so I'm going to think about whether or not this is going to go forward. Okay, and if you can put your hands back down, that would be good. So we're heading toward the wrap up on this, and there's one more area for us to look at, and then I'm going to be opening the floor to either questions, or I'm going to divide you into some talking groups. And the last part is there is a default future. It's called apocalypse. And apocalypse is not just a climate change apocalypse. Apocalypse is the whole thing. And this is going back to those 12 global challenges. What happens when all of those things go bad at the same time? All of those things go bad and multiply the badness. All of those things get to a point where none of us can handle it. That is a future that many, many, many of our children and young adults are focused on right now. They think that's their future. I think it's not. I think that we have to have a different kind of future. Well, there's one kind of future, and I know a lot of people get caught up in this, which is what I call the Pollyanna future. Everything's just going to be absolutely wonderful all the time, and all we have to do is wish and make it so. I think that wishful thinking isn't the thing that's going to get us to roll our sleeves up and do the heavy lifting work. That we were put here for a reason. And the reason isn't just to say, I got mine, I hope you get yours. The reason that we're here is for us to exercise our compassion, and to do that in such a dramatic way that it lifts all of us up, lifts us up out of our lethargy, lifts us up out of our problems. One of the examples I use for this, and I don't think there's anybody on the call that remembers this. This was 25 years or so in Portland. And we had really, really bad flooding on the Willamette River, torrential rains. The rains had basically flooded all the dams that were on the Willamette River. And the city of Portland the downtown area was about to get flooded. they couldn't sandbag fast enough. The city workers just were behind in sandbagging. And I don't know who had the idea of doing this, but they just put an appeal out on the radio and the television. If anybody can help us to sandbag, we want you to come out and help us load up sandbags and put them in place. Well, Portland turned out. Thousands and thousands and thousands of people came down to the waterfront to load sandbags. So many people came out that the workers had to organize them so that, well, you only get to put 10 sandbags up because all these other people want their time to put the sandbags up. At the time, I had a staff of 7 people, and I told everybody, close up shop here. We're going downtown, and we're going to load sandbags. It was one of those times when you really had a sense of coming together in a common humanity for a common purpose and achieving the purpose. Downtown did not flood. And we were so proud of what we did. Actually, this was during Bill Clinton's administration. He flew into Portland just to congratulate us for this is civic spirit in a nutshell. We need more of those experiences. So the opposite of the 12 global challenges, I think you find in this book that I wrote, The Chronicles of the Upheavals. In the Chronicles of the Upheavals, all of the disasters that could possibly hit humanity hit all at the same time. And we find some really innovative ways of responding to these challenges. So it's not business as usual, and it's not business as, we'll let them respond to the problem. But it's like, no, all of us are going to be using our ingenuity, our creativity, and some really good hard work in order to build this whole new society from the ground up, from our basic understanding of the world up. Okay, so I am first going to ask if there are any questions or comments, okay? And I see this is a very quiet group. So what I'm going to do, and I'm doing this even as I am talking, is put you in some breakout rooms. Oh, Dinah, I see your hand just went up. And so I'm going to invite you to lower your hand, to unmute yourself, and I'm going to turn on your video. Where'd you go? I'm not hearing you or seeing you. Still can't hear you. We've had this hearing problem before, haven't we? And I don't see you either. Ta-da! Okay. How's it going?
Okay.
Good.
My question, I had a question about I probably have heard it before, the crossing the Dragon's Gate. Is that story anywhere where I can get it?
No. And it's interesting because when I realized I was going to tell it, I'm trying to find who told it to me. I know it was a guy, and I know I was in his lecture, and so this is a lecturer of some kind, but I really don't remember who told it to me. And this is one of the times I can claim this for my own now, and it's like, no, that's not nice, Shariff. So
I'll Google it.
Yeah, no, I tried that too.
Oh, okay.
It ain't there, you know. So
So
yeah,
just a lot of the details, just really, you know, it's like I want to stay with that story.
yeah. No, I invite people to do that. I mean, I really think that it's really a powerful story. I tried to tell it as fully as he did. Like, you know, this girl really did have trials and tribulations to get her to this point. It wasn't like, oh yeah, the city on the hill is just over that way. It's 3 bus stops, you know, um, and to stop there. And I
Yeah.
can't tell you the number of people I know who have stopped and set up shop outside their golden city, where
Hmm.
they actually forget what the goal is. You know, they think that the goal is to get a bigger tent outside the golden city, and that's not it at all. You know, that's not where our good is. So back
Right.
on that table behind my head, when I'm having my breakfast or lunch or dinner, there's a lamp that faces me, and on the lamp is just a little post-it note that says, focus on the big picture. Because I can get so absorbed in all the small stuff that I forget what the big stuff is. I forget that there even is big stuff. And I start getting real, you know, bent out of shape around the big stuff. Okay. Um, so I'm going
Thank
to divide us up into, but good seeing you. And I'm going to put you in, and you can undo your video.
Okay.
I'm trying to see. Um, let's see here. So I'm going to try to do 2 rooms with 3 people in each room, and um, I'm this breaks out really well. Okay, and so um, I'm not going to leave you with a particular question. I want you to just give your impression of what it is that you are yeah, of all of this. You know, you can take whatever issue you want and suggest one to your group. And so we've got, and I'm not going to do a group for the room here. So I'm going to pause the recording while I'm putting you all in your rooms, and I may drift in from time to time, act like I'm not there. If you start talking to me, I'm going to unplug from your room. Okay, I'll talk to you. And we're going to do this for about 15 minutes. Oh, no, let's do this for about 10 minutes, and I'll check in with you. Okay, so you should be getting invited to go into your rooms now. And I see some of us leaving, and there's there you go. And Matthew, I see you as the last one here, and you should be going into your room. There you go. So our first room is back, and now our second room has collapsed. So I guess y'all were into it or something, you know. So if you want to say something, unmute yourself and let me know how your experience was and what you talked about.
Okay, this is Catherine, and I want to say hi to Dinah.
Yeah, got 2 troublemakers on my call here, so yeah.
But I enjoyed being in the break room with Delaney and Julian, and we had some trouble audio hearing you, Sharif. But we didn't have any trouble in the breakout room, and we got to hear all about Delaney and the work she's been doing with you, and about this retreat house. Is it retreat house that you go to? That sounds
about the eco village. Yeah,
eco.
I call it an eco village. Mm-hmm.
I'd love to hear more about that. I need more time in the breakout room.
Well, there's nothing that stops us from having a session of nothing but breakout room. I mean, I can deal with some of that. I mean, I'll sit in the corner and cry because I want to talk, but I can get over that. Yeah, or we can have a session on the imaginal village, okay, the imaginal the idea of imaginal villages around the country and around the world. There's several people who have gotten kind of caught fire around the I'm supposed to pick this up every time I talk about it, the Chronicles of the Upheavals. It's a big book. I mean, this is like my weightlifting exercise here. But there's some folks in Poland, there's some folks in Spain, there's some folks in Asheville, all of whom are starting to point in the direction of let's create a model for what we're looking at. So maybe what we can do is schedule some time in the very near future to have a global conversation about that. So yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. And Robin's sitting on one. So
hello, Robin.
Yeah.
Hello, Robin.
Yeah, you gotta unmute yourself. I think I can unmute you. I can unmute you. There you go.
Hello, Catherine. Yeah, so I think that's, for me, a really important piece of all of this is to have a clearer vision in my consciousness of where we're heading. What is it all about? What is all this conversation? Where can it lead us?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I'm voting yes too. So yeah, that'll make Matthew our only holdout. He does. I'm sure he's not a holdout. So yeah. What else happened? What else did you hear? What else did you say in your breakout room? Yeah.
I talked about the work I've been doing with some our friend Delaney, my friend Josh, talking about building an app for activism. He's working on food justice, and I was thinking about the work I'm doing with Carbon Washington, giving people short but really meaningful tasks that they can do that really make an impact in getting carbon pricing and other important reforms done. We talked about the climate strike that was last week, and about that's a really big ask for people. So it makes it people don't do it. But if we give people things that are short and impactful, I think that will be something that can get people engaged, and then start them small in terms of the time, but not the impact. And we can build them up to things like going to lobby days.
Right.
I believe that will work.
Yeah. So number one, yes. Okay, so now I'm going to move right on to number two. Okay, so number one was yes. Number two is be careful that your impactful idea doesn't become all-consuming. Okay, and this is an experience I had when I was working with Sarvodaya in Sri Lanka, that they had, when they walked into a village, They had 7 levels of activity already in their mind, in their back pocket. And the first thing they did was ask the village what they thought their needs were. And I sat in on maybe 30, 40, 50 of these initial village meetings. They all said the same thing. If they said, we need water, we need a reliable well, or we need electricity, okay? And if they said water, Sarvodi would say, we'll help you dig your own well. And that was very different when the politicians would come to town. We're going to dig a well for you, and it's going to be so deep, and it's going to, we'll do that. And as soon as the politician would leave the village, they even forgot that they ever went to that village. They forgot the promise. All they wanted was the votes. So Sarvodia would do this really sophisticated organizing for the village. And basically the village provided the labor, the land, the Sarvodia raised money for the materials like the concrete liner, etc. And when they finished the well, they would have a celebration, and if the dancers are out there dancing, and there's a lot of food, etc. And right at that moment, Sarvodia would then say, "What's next?" And we've got these 10 or 15 different things you should be thinking about. You could open up a village bank. You can start some village businesses. You can do such and such and such. And they would slowly walk them through what they would consider to be a mature level. And at the mature level of activity, the villages would go out to other villages and say, we got a well, we got a bank, we did all this stuff because we decided to be part of this process, and then they got other villages involved. They call those pioneering villages. So everybody's starting from their own self-interest, but that self-interest has to be extended away from the individual into the group. Then has to be extended beyond I need water, or one of our biggest issues in this country right now is homelessness. I need a house. And then everybody stops acting, waiting for those people in these comfortable houses and these big offices to make decisions on how to get the housing, and they never do. And so we can build houses. I mean, what's it take besides a bunch of straw bales and some plaster? We know this stuff. So we can be involved in walking through that process, but there just simply has to be enough we's involved. Okay, and that's the place where I've been for the last 3 decades or so. Okay, like getting enough people, and this is the base group for Sarvodia, getting enough people in that base group to go to the village and say, we're going to be here through your entire process. I may have told everybody on this call this, but I didn't tell the people on the recording this. I'm going to say this for the people on the recording. Sarvodia is based in Sri Lanka and was basically the brainchild of one person, Dr. A.T. Aryaratne. And as an experiment, he took some of his high school students. He was a biology teacher. Took some of his high school students to a village that had no resources. It was just nothing there, and he had them work for the lowest class of person in their society. His students, which were elite students, They had never seen anything like this. They had never heard that villages like this existed. So after he took his 20 students or so, the next month, 200 students show up and they want to go to a village and help out. The next month, thousands of students that are wanting to use their labor to help those who are not as privileged as they are. And that became the nucleus of the Sarvodaya movement. That after a while, there were tens of thousands of people that were organized for the benefit of their entire society. No one had ever asked them to do that before. Now, there have been several attempts at making Sarvodaya happen here in the United States, and they've all failed. And they fail for some particular reasons. And we can talk about that if we want to. I mean, and actually, I can get Dr. Aryaratne and his son, Dr. Vinya, to come on our call and talk about Sarvodaya, and they can talk about what happened in Sri Lanka. They can't talk about what to do here in America, because nobody knows. We're all in limbo land here. So, but we can try things, you know. The reason that Sarvodaya did not work in the other attempts that were down in Los Angeles, there was an attempt up in Wisconsin, a couple of attempts in New York state. And the reason they didn't work is that it was always aimed at those people over there. We're trying to benefit those people over there, as opposed to doing something that's going to benefit us all. So the 12 global challenges are not the 12 global challenges that those people over there are facing. It's the 12 global challenges that all of us are facing. Each one of us is facing it differently, but all of us are facing it. So let me think about that. And like I said, I think I'd have to check the time. This would be early tomorrow morning there. So I think it could work out. And to get them to say something about all this. Okay, it's top of the hour, and I said we were going to finish at top of the hour, so let's finish at the top of the hour. Any other last thoughts or points before we need to go? So thank you very much, and if we can all unmute ourselves, we can all say goodbye at the same time. I've enjoyed doing this. This video will be up and running as soon as I can get it there. Maybe tonight, but definitely sometime tomorrow. And I'll get this, and so it'll be available for folks. And I look forward to seeing you next week, where we get to do the rest of the rest of our process. So,
how will we get the link to it?
Good question. Wow. Okay. Based on bye. No, I've got everybody's email address here, but how we're going to put it up for everybody else, I may need to send out a notice when it's available to everybody on my list, which we'll see. Okay. This is why I like to have people registered, so that I can just say, I'll send it to the registered list. So, I know what I'll do. No, I can't do that either. Let me stop speculating on this call. Let me just end the call, and then I'll figure out what I'm going to do.
For next week, it's the same link that we used for today. So
yes.
To get to this link for the next webinar is the same link.
It will be the same link?
Yes.
It will be the same link. Okay.
Yep, same time, 7 o'clock Pacific, and we will go from there. So thank you, and I will see you all next week.
Bye.
See everybody.
Yeah, see you.
Bye.
Yeah,
Bye, Julian.
yeah, bye.
Bye,
Julian.
Yes.